mood for us? I mean, the opening price, it kept dropping, and then finally it opened at $42.
Well, it was
not
long.
what you would have wanted.
I mean, you're standing there in a sort of pen as a reporter, watching all the board members stand there, and there are these traders sort of coming up with numbers, and they have this indicated range. So it starts off, I think it was 46 to 48, and then it just moves down and down and down, and before you know it, it's below the IPO price, which is definitely a bad sign, and just keeps going down. So that process of sort of slowly admitting a bit of defeat there was just sort of hard to believe given all the ramp up to the IPO, and like you said, talk of 120 billion at one point. But
from Uber's own bankers.
Right, that pitching the IPO, that's clearly where Uber wanted to end up. Dara Khosrowshahi and Nelson Che, the CFO, have incentives to get the company to 120. And so they have a long way to go. I think it's 74 ballpark market cap right now. So a long way till they get to.
I think it's about 69.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
69,
exactly.
at least according to the Bloomberg terminal.
Yeah.
So Dan, what happened?
I mean, it's not a storybook start to the IPO. And look, I think fundamentally part of it is the Lyft car crash coming out of the IPO has definitely made institutional investors a little hesitant on Uber. And I think also this is one where, look, it's a risk-off trade that we're seeing in the tech market. Obviously, timing, is not ideal. But I think fundamentally it comes down to the $100 billion question continues to be, will investors kind of buy into the sum of the parts value? In our opinion, we believe this is kind of a near-term speed bump. We don't view this as this is the start of a Lyft 2.0. We think this is one that's going to be more of a blip rather than the start of a trend here.
Now, Eric, you pulled Dara aside after my interview and got to talk to him a little bit more. Did you get any more indication about where his head is at, what the plan is now?
We got into some of the technicalities of the IPO process. For instance, I asked him, what metric do you think investors should watch over the next 3 months? It was interesting. He said bookings, which is a metric that Lyft isn't sharing. So some antagonism I took there saying, oh, you should look at the very top line. It was interesting from your interview sort of saying that there was the focus on getting to profitability at some point, but it's all sort of a matter of when.
Right. And Dan, you pointed out, Lyft not reporting bookings now, take rates, investors did not like that. Dara is saying we are going to report bookings. So do you think that greater transparency, at least to start, is going to help Uber?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have a brighter spotlight on, because I view them as a different animal in terms of where Uber is, not just globally, but in terms of that three-head value, that we're seeing in terms of ride sharing, eats, freight, as well as an autonomous. But transparency needs to be key, because right now, it's not just investors they need to keep happy, but also on the other side, they need really to be a transparent company. And it's something where with regulation and other issues, potentially around the corner, they need to do a balancing act here. And to get a $100 billion valuation with no profitability. Remember, Amazon, Facebook, when you go back to, even though they had profitability, this continues to be a show me story. I think that's what you saw today.
But Amazon's growth wasn't slowing out of the gate. Uber's growth is slowing. Can we really compare it to Amazon?
Well, I view it as more the Amazon of transportation. So I don't necessarily put it in that hallowed sort of ground where I put in Amazon, but I think you have to look at how tech investors are viewing ride sharing. It's 90 million consumers. Eats is 15% penetrated, and it's where this could go. And look, it's a 3% penetrated market across the board. That's why any tech investor right now, as I could tell you the whole day talking to them, they're doing their math trying to figure out on the sum of the parts where this is worth, especially like what we've seen with Lyft, where that continues to drop like a rock, even today because of the Uber. Right now in ride sharing, even though Lyft is Uber's, what I view as their little brother, it continues to have a negative impact on Uber stock.
And by the way, Lyft also ended the day down more than 7%, so they fell in tandem. Eric, what are investors telling you? Do they think it's the next Amazon of transportation, or is it the eBay?
Well, I think, and I've said all along, and we're going to freak out today, but I think the fact remains that there are investors who believe in the story and understood that they didn't get everything about Amazon when it came along, and now Jeff Bezos looks like a genius. And then there are other people that say, the losses are so large, there's no way you can model how this company makes a profit. You're depending on total transformation in the transportation industry. And so when you have these really dueling approaches to looking at the stock, I mean, we had Lyft have its quarterly earnings beat analyst expectations on most everything. Most analysts said this looks good, and the stock still went down. It shows that there's a disconnect between how sort of the market, who wants to think about this in terms of revenue and growth, understands the stock, and then a lot of skepticism outside of that.
Now, Dan, you put out your note last night before the company went out of the gate. Your price target $65. It's still $65, which would give Uber a $109 billion valuation. Does the reaction today give you any pause?
Not really. Look, I mean, let's call it like it is. This is not an ideal start coming out of the box for any IPO.
And look, this is just the first day. There's a lot
and especially given the microscope that Uber is under. But in our opinion, in terms of where we see this over the next 12, 18, 24 months, this doesn't move the needle. But it also speaks to, like, I could just tell you, Lyft, the hypersensitivity to what we've seen with Lyft, with that sort of train wreck so far coming out of the gates. Shorts are out there. They're looking at Uber. You look at the stock. You're like, why can't it happen again? That's why Dara, what he's talking about in terms of transparency, is key. They need to make sure they don't make the same mistakes that Lyft's made.
Eric, let's talk a little bit about the personal drama. Dara asked Travis Kalanick not to be on the podium ringing the bell. Travis was there today with his father and trying to sort of hide from reporters. I think you caught a glimpse of him. You know, what was your take on Dara's answer to whether Travis will be on the board in a year?
You know, Dara has a very tough position because I think there are a lot of new investors coming into Uber that have to sort of be told that this is a different company. And so on the one hand, he needs to say, I'm the leader now, I'm the face of the company, we've reformed, we're not that same old company. On the other hand, Travis is a major shareholder. He's the one that got it to the 76, you know, not quite 76, but that price in the Saudi round. You know, a lot of the valuation gains that have come are under the leadership of Travis Kalanick. So Dara has this hard position where he needs to keep, you know, a sort of hostile force close to him while also signaling publicly distance. So honestly, I give credit to Dara being able to thread the needle, sort of say nice things while distancing himself. You know, he put a bunch of old, longtime employees that Travis likes in the box. So I think he made a smart move. It was longtime Uber people who have really run a lot of the core businesses being celebrated. It just wasn't the guy we've all heard of, Travis Kalanick.
Uber's diplomat-in-chief,
Exactly.
Dara Khosrowshahi. Okay, Dan, are you confident in Dara's leadership?
Look, I mean, I think we're confident in his leadership, but ultimately, as we're talking about some of these other companies, in terms of in Amazon, Facebook, Google, they all had special leaders. And I think that's why he's under a little more of a microscope in terms of what he needs to do for Uber. Forget the, you know, some of the noise, but in terms of just executing fundamentally on the vision, I mean, no doubt, there's pressure on him and the management team now to execute. It's a show me story.